everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, this is La Casa de Katie, my YouTube channel where I do a lot of videos about lifestyle, faith, and adoption. Today I will be talking about a topic that a lot of people like to shy away from in the adoption community because it isn't a great feeling, and that is post-adoption depression or post-adoption blues. So basically what that is when you feel very sad, very down, depressed, hopeless, anxious, fearful after you receive an adoptive placement. And just as a disclaimer, I am by no means a medical or mental health professional, but I am an adoptive parent, and I have experienced this post-adoption depression or post-adoption blues myself. And so I want to kind of just share what it is today and share my experience so that if you're going through this, you don't feel like you are totally alone, because it is extremely common. In fact, I would say that many adoptive families experience this, whether it's the mom or the dad in the family. So you're not alone, and I hope that this video will help you realize a little bit more about what it is, what are some of the symptoms, and also ways that you can help combat it. Post-adoption depression actually shares a lot of qualities with postpartum depression. So if you have ever experienced postpartum depression, you may realize that some of these symptoms are very similar. Obviously, you just don't have all of the hormonal changes going on that you would if you had just given birth. One of the first signs or symptoms of post-adoption depression is exhaustion. Now, obviously, all new parents are exhausted no matter how you came to be a parent. You may have a newborn and they're crying, and you're obviously tired because you're getting a lack of sleep. But exhaustion is a sign of post-adoptive depression. And oftentimes, I found that with myself, I was exhausted even though my daughter was sleeping. We have been blessed with a daughter who sleeps a lot. She is 2 years old. I think she usually sleeps about 13 to 14 hours a night, which I know is kind of crazy, but that's just how she is. Like, her foster mom said she was like that even as a little baby. She slept a ton, and she's a good sleeper. But despite that, and despite the fact that I knew that, I could not sleep at night when she first moved in. I was constantly worried that she was going to be awake in the middle of the night and crying, and that we wouldn't be going to get her, and then she would think that we didn't love her. And so thoughts like that kept me up all through the night, even when I could be sleeping because she was asleep. Another way that this exhaustion can show up in your life is just that every single day feels like an eternity. Like, you wake up in the morning, you get your kid up, and you go, oh great, here we go again. This is going to be the longest day of my life, just like every other day since we've been placed. I really struggled with that, especially when I was staying home with our daughter during my maternity leave time. Every day felt impossible to get through. And when I say it, it sounds dramatic, but that is how I felt. I felt like when I woke up, I was counting down the hours until she went to sleep again so that I could have a little bit of time by myself. And I think in my situation, this really came from the fact that our daughter was extremely clingy when she came to us, which I know is a good thing in terms of attachment. She was forming an attachment with us, but wow, she wanted to be held as much as a newborn. I could not ever even stand up and walk out of the room to go to the bathroom without her having a full-on meltdown because she was so afraid I was just going to leave forever. And while I sympathized with that and I had empathy for her situation, that wears on a person to be needed that much, especially by a kid who was not the size of a newborn. Like, she was extremely heavy, and she wanted me to pick her up and carry her every single place that we went. It was extremely exhausting. So obviously those days felt really long to me, and there were a lot of other things that played into that, which I'll cover later in this list. So another sign of post-adoption depression is feeling fear or anxiety on a regular basis. Like I said, I had a hard time sleeping because I was so afraid that our daughter was waking up in the middle of the night, even though she actually wasn't. We had a baby monitor in her room, and if she had woken up, I would have heard it, but I had this fear that I was not going to hear it, and that she was going to be feeling like she was alone, or that we didn't love her, and that then I would be failing as a parent. I really struggled with this fear that I was going to somehow traumatize our child even more. Like, she had already been through so much, and I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to be the perfect parent when I, unlike a lot of adoptive families, we don't have any biological kids of our own. So this wasn't just our first time adopting, it was our first time being parents. But the bar that I set for myself was like someone who was a professional, who had adopted 13 kids before and knew exactly what they were doing. And I was putting a ton of pressure on myself that was causing a lot of fear and anxiety. I think another big example of fear is feeling like you got yourself in over your head and you don't think you're going to actually be able to handle being a parent. Now, if you looked at my resume, you would think I would be okay at being a parent. Like, I've been a teacher it's my 7th year as a teacher. I've been around kids. I worked at a camp when I was younger. I am the oldest sibling and I'm quite a bit older than my younger siblings, so I helped with them. Like, on paper, I would be a good parent. And according to our home studies and what they wrote about us, it was clear that they thought I was equipped to be a parent. But none of that mattered in those moments when I just felt like I failed. I did not think that I was doing a good job. I thought I was in over my head. I thought maybe I'm not cut out to be a parent. Why did I do this? Why did I sign up for this? What if I now traumatize this kid and she's gonna grow up and be in therapy all because I was a bad mom? And I was putting so much pressure on myself. And those feelings were constant. Like, it wasn't just like I felt like that, I don't know, once or twice a week. It was like every day I was thinking that multiple times a day, and it was just like overcrowding my mind. I did not feel this way, but I know that there are some parents who were so afraid that they were being bad parents that they thought their adoption might fail or that the social workers might come in and take the kids back. I knew in my mind that it was not that dire of a situation. I didn't think anyone was going to come and take our daughter from us, but I worried that they were going to leave her with us and then I was going to mess her up somehow. And like I said, those feelings were really constant. The next feeling that is really common with post-adoption depression is anger. And anger is not an emotion that I'm very comfortable with. I do not consider myself a really angry person. And when I do get angry, I just feel horrible about it. I'm generally very calm, very peaceable, and I think to me that's kind of part of my identity. And so when I get angry, it feels like I'm, I don't know, betraying part of my identity in some way. And let's just face it, kids make you angry. If you're a parent, you understand sometimes your kid does things that are going to drive you crazy. Oftentimes that is every day. They're going to do something or many things that are going to make you mad. And it was very hard at the beginning to control my feelings. I am quite an emotional person. I'm pretty expressive emotionally around people I'm comfortable with, like my husband. And so I found myself getting outwardly angry with my daughter, and I felt horrible after. Every time I got angry with her, I just felt terrible, which that's seeping into one of the other categories, so I won't go there yet. But you have this anger. You might be angry at your child for their behaviors. You might be angry at yourself for not handling it well. I think I really dealt with both of those, but especially the anger at myself. Because if I got angry with my daughter, it always ended in me feeling angry at myself about getting angry at her. So you can see how this is kind of a vicious cycle. And the next category is grief. So it is very, very common that you are going to have grief after you adopt. I know this sounds crazy to those of you who have not adopted yet, because you're probably in the waiting process and you're just sitting there thinking, no, once I get that kid, I'm going to be so happy, I'm going to be so thankful, and I'm going to feel that way all of the time. Newsflash, you won't feel that way all of the time, and that's okay. It is very normal to grieve your old life. I know for my husband and I, we did not have kids for the first 5.5 years of marriage. We were very used to our lifestyle, and although we really wanted kids, there were things that we had to say goodbye to. And this really goes for anyone who's a first-time parent, but I do think this is exacerbated by the situation of adopting. Even people who have already had children before may regret adopting, and that sounds really terrible, but those feelings don't last forever. You may have moments where you feel like, I regret doing this. Why did I ruin my family? Or why did I ruin my marriage? Everything was great before. Why did I think this was a good idea? And those feelings are very normal. I just want to repeat that because I know that when I had feelings of just missing my old lifestyle, I was just kicking myself because I was like, why aren't you thankful? This is what you wanted. And I was just telling myself that, but it is a normal feeling to have. Another way that you may be grieving is if you had really high expectations of what your adopted child was going to be like and the types of activities they were going to be able to handle. You may quickly realize that that is not how it's going to work, and your kid does not measure up to this ideal image of a kid you had in your mind. In my case, I think that I did not have very high expectations of what a child entering our home would behave like, because I think our agency did a really good job of preparing us. Just for the fact that it's not going to be perfect, it's not going to be exactly how you imagine it, and that we can't put this pressure on kids who are coming out of foster care or coming out of an orphanage overseas, depending on where you adopted, but we can't put this pressure on them to just act and behave like a kid who has had a healthy family their entire lives. It's just a totally different situation. And finally, you might feel grief about just what your child has gone through. I know that when we were in the process of adopting and we would get files on kids, when we would be saying yes to them, we'd like to be considered. I mean, some of their files were heartbreaking, and it is really traumatizing in a way as a parent to know all the things that your child has gone through and to just be weighted down with that grief of what they've experienced. And that is very common as well. So if you're feeling that way, you are not alone. Okay, 2 more categories, and the next one to me is the biggest one that I struggled with, which was shame and guilt. So if you are experiencing shame and guilt as an adoptive parent, you may be thinking things like, I'm not as attached to my child as I should be. Why don't I feel love for this child immediately? Why does it feel like I'm babysitting someone else's child instead of taking care of my own? So I really think that this shame and guilt comes from all the other categories. So when you're feeling angry, when you're feeling exhausted, when you're feeling grief, you really start to feel ashamed and you feel guilty. Why are you thinking and feeling those things? You should be happy. And I think that's what a lot of parents tell themselves, like, I should be happy. This is what I wanted. I worked towards adopting this child and now I have her or him. And why am I feeling this way? You may also be asking yourself, why am I not attaching to this child immediately? Why don't I feel this automatic love and automatic bond with them like you see in the movies when people adopt? Why do I feel sometimes like this isn't really my child? Like I don't feel this true love. Or maybe you feel love for your child, but you really don't like them and you don't like spending time with them. I know that for me, this was a big struggle, and this is really hard to admit because I love my daughter. I'm thankful that she's in my life. I'm thankful to be her mother. But there were many times at the beginning where I did not like being with her. And that filled me with such guilt and such shame because everyone else who met her loved being with her. Like, they thought she was adorable. They would tell us how lucky we were that we got such a good kid, and we did get to adopt a younger child out of foster care when we were open to adopting older kids. And so while I do believe that our daughter is a huge blessing to us, that doesn't negate the fact that that bond was not immediate. And a lot of times what those friends and family members saw was her at her very best because she wasn't as comfortable around them. And oftentimes I was the one getting the brunt of all of her anger, all of her sadness, and just every negative emotion came out around me because I'm the mom. And not to say that my husband did not experience that too, but since I was home with her at the beginning, it was just a little bit different. But those people who come over for a couple hours, she's a very social child and she loved to be around them, and she was happy and would put on a little show. And then when they left, it was back to hitting, biting, kicking, and those types of things would just really get to me. And I would just feel guilty that why didn't I like her like everyone else did? I'm her mom. I should like her more than anyone. And so that guilt was really like sinking in deep into my heart. And even today, it's like sometimes that still comes up. And I just have to remind myself it's normal to feel that way. It's okay to feel that way. I need to choose how I respond to that. Now to the last sign of post-adoption depression, which is hopelessness. And this is very common in any type of depression, but just feeling like nothing is ever going to change and it's going to be this hard forever. Oh my goodness, I relate to this so much. I have a really hard time when I'm in a difficult situation being able to kind of just say, okay, it's bad now, but it's going to get better. Which is funny because I'm a very future-oriented person. I love to plan, but somehow I just did not think that things were going to get better, or I felt that it would take years and years and years until they did. And I just really felt this hopelessness, like, man, she's gonna be this way forever, and I'm gonna continue to be a bad parent, and I'm never going to get better at being a parent. I'm never gonna feel more patient with her. I'm never going to get through this sadness and this guilt I feel. But that was not true, but that feeling was there. I think there's also this hopelessness of thinking, why did I even do this in the first place? What was I thinking? I've got myself in a situation that I can't get out of, and I honestly just want to escape. And I think that is a very common feeling for a lot of people who experience post-adoption depression. So there you have it. Those are some of the biggest signs of post-adoption depression. And if you are feeling this way, you are not alone. This is very normal. Many adoptive parents feel this way. I myself felt this way after we adopted. If you relate to any of those, I just ask you, can you just put a thumbs up and like this video? Because that way other people can see that they are not alone in those feelings. In my next video, I'm gonna share some of the reasons behind that post-adoption depression and also share some tips for you to get out of that funk. Thanks for stopping by my channel. Hope you have a great day.